Okay, so I'm here today with Mr. Bob Seeley. Thank you so much, sir. My name
you're
is
welcome.
Paul Ortiz, University of Florida, and we're here, the National Park Service, Samuel Proctor Oral History Program Project, on really thinking about the Underground Railroad, its legacies, freedom seekers, conductors. Bob, could you start off by stating your full name, just for the record, and your date of and place of birth?
My name is Robert Seeley. I grew up in Havertown, Pennsylvania. I was born October 22nd of 1950. I'm an ID twin. I have a twin brother. His name is Warren. I was 3 pounds at birth. They didn't give me a chance to live. I was in the hospital for 2 months. I'm blind in one eye because of that too. And my twin brother is too. I went to Hartford High School. We didn't cover the Underground Railroad. We didn't talk about the antebellum period. I proceeded on to Penn State. I was a Hort major up Penn State. Same time, Franco Harrison lied on me show up there at Penn State. And I'm a lifetime member of Penn State, lifetime member. I owned a landscape business. First, I had, after graduation from Penn State, I moved to Lititz, Pennsylvania, and then moved back to Havertown, worked in nurseries, garden centers, landscape business. And then I got tired of making money for other people, and I decided to go in my own business, which I did in 1984. And then I decided I'm going to teach college, so I taught college. Then I had a couple clients of mine that own businesses, and they said, "Could you help me in the winter when your business is slow?" I said, "Well, I teach college too." I said, "What kind of business do you have?" "Well, we run a convenience store. Can you do the graveyard shift?" "Oh, sure I can." So I did the graveyard shift there. And then another one was on a janitorial service, and they said, "We need someone to clean some office buildings. Could you give us a couple months?" I said, "Sure, I'll give you a couple months." So I was getting 4 hours sleep for a couple of years. So when I taught at college, I taught at a couple of colleges. I taught for about 35 years. I designed a program for horticulture, teaching 6 classes, and I lectured, not just in Pennsylvania, but in New Jersey, in Delaware, and in Maryland. So
Well, which colleges, Bob?
Delaware County Community College, Newman College, Hartford Adult School, not Hartford College, Hartford Adult School. And I did that for about 15 years, which was a lot of fun because most of the people wanted to take the class. In fact, when I taught, it was in community education. So everyone taught the class. I never had to throw anyone out of the class. And most of them were, 30 and over. I think the oldest one I had was about 85 years old, and she wanted to take the classes. So not only did I lecture on the Underground Railroad, I taught horticulture classes for a number of years.
Wow, wonderful. Could you talk a little bit about your family, Bob, when you were growing up, kind of take a step back and think about your childhood and what life was like back then, and a little bit about your parents and grandparents?
Well, I grew up with Grandma. Grandma took my twin brother and I in, and my 3 sisters. Both my parents were disabled. One was my father, who ties into the Garrett family, had an addiction, and it was alcohol. So I don't drink because of that. And my mother, after she lost my brother, actually tried to commit suicide. So, and actually was institutionalized because of that. So Grandma, who was our Mother Teresa, took all 5 of us in and raised us. And actually took her mother in, and her other daughter she took in, and gave us all the bedrooms, and she slept on the couch. She just had a house dress and maybe one or 2 pairs of shoes. So she was an example for us to give. My childhood was very rewarding. It shaped the rest of my life by her setting an example for us to follow. So it was actually
did you pursue, like, was there religion? Did you go to church as a child?
my grandmother, since she had basically house stresses, and my grandfather died in 1956. I was 5 years old then. And she didn't have a whole lot of clothes. She had actually took a dress and ripped it in half to make 2 dresses for my 2 sisters. And she insisted we go to church. We didn't have a car, so it was within walking distance of the church. There's a non-denominational church. It was called Grace Chapel in Havertown. And she insisted that we go to church. All 5 of us went to church, but she stayed home. We didn't have a whole lot of money, and our family, we just shipped together in order to pay the electric bill, the water bill. We had a roof over our head, and we had food on the table. But if any relative would come by, she said, "Get another plate out. Here comes Alf and Viola," and that was normal for her. She actually, her mother deserted her, and she actually raised her 2 brothers and would pick coal up from the tracks. Wow. So she sacrificed her life for other people. Mm-hmm. So it was a good example for me. It showed a lot of love.
Nice. Did you, as a young boy, do you remember any discussions about slavery, the Underground Railroad, any race, anything like that?
Well, I heard about the Underground Railroad when I was younger, but it wasn't until my father died in 1971, and he died of cirrhosis of the liver. He couldn't stop drinking. And I met him a couple times, and of course we paid for his funeral. He's actually buried here. I paid for his funeral, and because that's what my grandmother said we should do, even though he wasn't around for you. So I met his brothers at that particular time. Although I knew them, I got a chance to talk to them, and they told me we were related to a famous person, but that's all they said. So I started doing genealogy, and I found out who we're related to. Wow. And then I said to myself, why isn't this part of history talked about? Are we ashamed of it?
Wow. I want you to kind of stop in that moment and try to think back, like when you first learned this, what kind of impact, Thomas Garrett is a larger-than-life figure in U.S. history, but what did it mean to you as a family member and a person, like when you first learned about it?
Well, I was proud of Thomas Garrett on what he did when I found out what he stood for, and he actually lived in this area where we're at right now for first 33 years in Upper Darby here. And Upper Darby didn't know about it. We didn't talk about it. They named a road after my family, Garrett Road. But I thought to myself, someone has to educate others.
What about the schools, though?
The schools didn't cover it. The schools didn't cover it from elementary school up to high school. John Scott, my American history teacher in high school, didn't even mention Dred Scott case. We talked about Dred Scott case. But there's so much to cover, and I'm thinking, I said to John Scott, how come we're not covering the antebellum period, and how come we're not covering slavery? Oh, because we're not allowed to. We have a curriculum to follow, and that's not part of the curriculum. I guess the private schools could have covered it, some of the private schools. Mm-hmm. So I said, this lecture, let's talk about it. Let's research, and I've been to many historical societies. When I did the genealogy of our family, and you can see the one book there on how thick it is, and it was all different lines of the Garrett family. And I went to cemeteries, I went to funeral homes, all over to get as much information as possible. And then share it. Doesn't do any good to absorb it. Mm-hmm. It's sharing it. And verbally sharing it. And we have social media today. A lot of people against Facebook. I'll put it on Facebook. The stories on Facebook. I lecture in colleges. I want to reach as many people as possible. This is a love story about people working together for a cause. And I thought it was a wonderful story to tell. And again, I'm proud of not just Thomas, But Edward, his brother, who helped out, Isaac, who lived on this property, helped out, Philip, his older brother, Samuel, his half-brother, and then you have the Price family in Westchester, who Thomas Garrett's mother was Sarah Price, where his brother, Sarah Price's brother, was in Westchester, Benjamin, and he helped out on the under. So it's family and friends to freedom. Right. So Thomas, who can you trust? So he over the line, he had family in Westchester area, he had family here, he had friends from the Darby Friends meeting, and a lot of them are here on these, right here on these posters. And then there are marriages between the families, like the Garrett family and the Sellers family. Abigail Sellers, Edward's wife, grew up at Sellers Hall in Upper Darby. And her parents, George Sellers and Ann Ash, were abolitionists. A lot of the people around here were involved on the Underground Railroad. It has to be shared.
It has to be shared. What, as a descendant, what are some of your favorite stories, or the stories you think are most meaningful about the people that Thomas Garrett helped to freedom? I know there's a lot, but
I'm amazed at people traveling from the slave state of Delaware. A lot of people think Delaware was a free state. It was a slave. Some people say, oh, it was only slavery in the South and it wasn't in the North. Traveling from Delaware, from Maryland, from Virginia, and they don't know the way. A lot of them were on the plantations. They didn't know. And here, Anna Marie Jackson, with her 7 children, are running to freedom. Her husband actually committed suicide because some of the children were sold away, and he couldn't stand it anymore, so he committed suicide. So what's Anna Marie? Anna Marie doesn't want her children to grow up in shackles and be controlled. She wanted freedom, not just for herself, but for those children. So she finds a way, makes the connection, and winds up at Thomas's house, and Thomas sends her up here to his brother, Edward Garrett, Edward and Abigail Sellers Garrett, who were living in the original Garrett house. And they called it Cleveland Farms at that time. Originally it was called Riverview Farm. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they stopped there is because they feared someone was following them. And okay, let's get out of the way for a little bit. And then when we feel it's clear, then we'll send them to William Still's office in Philadelphia, who will record all that information about Anna Marie Jackson, so we can put families back together. See, she was also looking for, I think, her brother, who was living in New Jersey. So William Still recorded the information. Then William Still would also give her money, would give her transportation, would provide clothing, would provide medical care if she needed, and then up to New York, and then across New York, and finally into Canada. Mm-hmm. And I had the honor to actually speak with the living family members of Anna Marie Jackson. And I try to connect with a lot of the family. That's one story. Mm-hmm. You had a story of a family stealing a carriage, I say borrowing a carriage, and running into Thomas's house. And they came from Chestertown, Maryland, and they wound up in Longwood area. I'm trying to think the name of the family. You know, you get these senior moments when you get older.
Yeah. But one of the themes you're bringing out, Bob, is that these families are connecting with each other. And they're engaged in what is very dangerous work, but they form bonds, they work together.
Yes.
Oftentimes across lines of race and even religion.
Yes.
But they find a way to work together. And it seems to me, what I'm learning from you so far is that the story doesn't end in 1865, that these families, many of them continue to have connections with each other. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I try to connect with as many family members as possible, not only my cousins, but also the people that run the Freedom that stopped at Thomas's house. And if I can connect to those families, um, that's what I try to do over the last, 30 years.
Okay.
And to tell the stories, because a lot of people still have letters and documents that are still in their attics. What more should we know about the families?
Exactly. Could you, Bob, you were mentioning that you first learned a lot about this incredible history from your father's brothers.
Right.
Could you take us back to that moment? And do you remember what they told you initially?
Well, it was just initially we have someone famous in our family, and that's the extent of it. And I just took it and ran from there. It was actually my grandmother on my father's side, my father's mother. She was a Plumley. It goes Seeley, Plumley, then Wright, Helen Bellsmell Wright, and then it goes to if I can call it Anna. I think it's Anna Maria or Maria Garrett. I have it here. If I can check. This is my line,
wow.
my direct line. So it goes May, my grandmother, who was an ID twin also. She had a twin who was Marion. And then it goes Helen Bellsmay Wright. Then it goes William Garrett Wright. And then it goes Anna Marie Garrett. Then Jonathan Garrett. Then Joseph Garrett, who married a Mary Sharpless. So I am a second cousin, 6 times removed of Thomas Garrett. But I'm also related to his first wife, Mary Sharpless.
Wow.
Their house is still standing. It's standing on it's Chester County Chamber of Commerce, Joseph's house is. Some of the family went to Goshen. They went to Willistown. They went to Sugartown area out near Westchester. Some of the family did. And they owned thousands of acres out there. They're involved with Goshen Friends, Willistown Friends, and a lot of them with Westtown School. There was some activity out there on the Underground Railroad also.
Yeah. You know, thinking back, and you've already kind of shared this with me, but I want to make sure for the record we have it. When you first learned that you were a descendant of these incredible people, I mean, how did it make you feel?
Oh, like I said, I felt proud. And then for Joseph to be the brother of Thomas Garrett's grandfather, who was Nathan. So that's where the connection is. So Thomas Garrett's grandfather was Nathan Garrett, and the brother was Joseph. I was just so proud of what they did. But again, like I said, the stories had to be told.
They had to be told, yeah. How did other family members, you know, as you began to educate people and share with them about Thomas Garrett and his connections, how did other family members in your family feel about these stories that you were kind of re-excavating?
Some of them didn't want to take the time to share the stories. They had other things that they had in mind, and they didn't want to take the time out. I felt it important to take that time to educate, like Douglas says, educate. Someone to keep it private. There was an incident where I had to be put in protective custody because I witness against an individual who was on the motorcycle gang. And the police, he actually came to my house and threatened me at the house. They put me in protective custody. And some of the family members were afraid that might happen to them. The guy was put in jail. I was used as a rebuttal witness in that particular case.
Was this connected to your knowledge of the Underground Railroad? Or?
He knew of my connection. He committed a crime. and I witnessed that crime. And he liked to use the N-word all the time. He and I differed, and he found out I was going to be a witness against him. He was involved with the Pagans, a motorcycle gang. He was also supposedly involved with the mob, and his attorney represented mob people too. So the threats on some members might be there. So some people didn't want to educate other people about it.
Did you feel like as you're learning this history and beginning to teach it, what was going on in the world around you in terms of like race or civil rights, or kind of, if you could walk us through kind of the politics of that time? Because you're talking now about, I could have this wrong, but I want to make sure you're talking about like the 1970s and 80s, kind of like,
Well,
is that?
in the 1960s, we had an African American family move into Hartford Township, and they stoned their house. I was appalled
Wow.
that they would do that, and actually the family moved out.
The house was,
The family that moved in,
yeah. But
Didn't
you're
wanna
saying the
take
house
it.
was attacked?
yeah,
Wow.
it was attacked, and that was back in I think it was the 60s, maybe it was the 50s.
Okay.
I got involved with Carrie Eishart, who owned Thornfield, who was where Samuel lived, his half brother, and she was involved with equality for everyone and fair housing. It went back to when I witnessed this, trying to get a African American family out of Havertown, and it was terrible. So I got involved with some organizations to change things.
Did you, yeah, and did you kind of connect that to your history work? I guess I'm trying to kind of, I'm thinking about, the civil rights movement. There is a kind of a blossoming of Black history in the middle of the civil rights movement that happened in different parts of the country. And so when you were telling these or learning these stories of the Underground Railroad, do you kind of connect that to the contemporary work you were doing with, say, fair housing, or is that kind of, were those separate worlds?
I'm not sure I understand completely the question, but I always believed in equality.
Okay, yeah.
And if you look at my family, that's a picture of my twin brother and I, and the individual next to us, his name is Radha Singh. Do you see the color of his skin?
Yes.
Okay. Now, his last name was Singh. His father was Indian. Race didn't matter to me because I learned at a very young age. We lived together for the first 6 years. Did I hear racial remarks against my cousin Radha? Yes, from even neighbors. And did it affect him? Yes, it did. But I always support him. Very intelligent individual who went to the Haverford School, not Harvard High School. And then he went to the University of Pennsylvania. Then there's another picture. I have 17 grandchildren.
All right.
They're not all of the white. They're not all white.
Exactly.
That's because of my grandmother, we learned to give. And out of the 17 grandchildren, 10 are biological, 7 are adopted. I don't know how many children our family has taken in foster care. I was a big brother to an individual who lost his father to cancer when he was 4. That comes from my grandmother on my mother's side.
Wow, this is amazing. This is so cool. Great photographs.
My one daughter, she took in 5, had 1 biological, another daughter who had cancer, and I put a down payment on the house next to me so she could have a place. She was living in my attic, and she took in 2 children. I don't know how many foster children. I'm going to show you another picture. I have a sister who just passed away. Her name is Mary. It was Mary McKinley when she. By the way, this is us. I like to hang out with my grandkids.
nice.
This is
That's so beautiful. I
some
love
of the
that.
grandkids. Mary just passed away. Let's see if I have I thought I had a picture of Mary. Yeah. Mary just passed away, and she would travel with me to a lot of events. Mary couldn't have any children. And I'm not going to go into why she couldn't have any children. I don't think that's important. She married a guy who was put in a orphanage. And his name was Bill, and he died of a heart attack, and she remarries. But she adopted 3 children. That's her 3 children.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
2 are African American, the other's Korean.
Wow.
It doesn't matter. And my grandma set the example years ago when she took all 5 of us in.
So it's a family tradition.
Yeah. So when I say read books, teach the kids when they're younger, I was taught when I was young. It didn't make a difference. And I had to share it, and sometimes people didn't like it. I remember getting punched in the face and losing some of my teeth, but that's all right.
Well, I want to get to when you started talking about Thomas Garrett, when you started talking about the Underground Railroad to family, but then now you're trying to get the word out when you're starting to learn more. Like, walk me through like what you thought was important to share with people about the Underground Railroad.
Well, research had to be first, and the genealogy and research, and put the puzzle together, and then share them about a love story about people caring about each other. My grandmother taught us about caring for each other. My maternal grandmother, and I felt they did the same thing as what my grandmother did. Taking in people, providing food, shelter, and clothing for them, just like my grandmother did. And people don't talk about it. Thomas Garrett and many other abolitionists and the people running to freedom, cared about other people. And that's what I want to share. People caring about other people at any cost. Some people were punished, put in chains, hung. Other people went on trial. They suffered, but they stuck to the cause because this was God's law. The law of the land is one thing, but it's God's law. And someone had to talk about God's law, about the abolitionist movement.
Yeah. A lot of people who don't understand the Underground Railroad, when they think about someone running away from slavery, they think of it as a very individualistic activity. They're just in it for themselves. They're leaving people behind. But you're giving us a different view. You're saying the Underground Railroad was this incredibly cooperative, loving activity that was about more than one person.
Yeah, and the Underground Railroad was about many brave people that didn't want to put their children through what they've gone through, and they understood, and they took that risk. Some were caught, and some made the connections. And it's about who you can trust. And if you had family connections, Thomas had family connections, and many of the others had family connections and faith connections. And I call it family and faith connections to freedom, whether it was church, whether it was Quakers, whether it was Longwood. And Longwood, the group of abolitionists at Longwood weren't all Quaker. And that was just over the line, and it was a safe place to go. So he made these, and I know Thomas used his family connections, his faith connections from Darby meeting to Longwood meeting. And then those individuals, when he would go to like Benjamin Price's house, Benjamin Price could send him to his brother in Philadelphia. There was another Price in Philadelphia. So, or or could send him to Westtown School. There was a case that I have that he was sent into Westtown School because there was a mathematician there. There was also a relative of Thomas who worked at Westtown School. Thomas felt he could trust so many people that he grew up with or that were family members. You had Samuel Rhodes here, a cousin, who was at Cobbs Creek Golf Course, and we have letters about Samuel Rhodes. It comes from Thomas Garrett's father's brother, Nathan, a line. And I have the genealogy. When I did genealogy, I looked for the connections and I compared the genealogy to the letters that I found in William Still's book and letters that we found in the attics of some of the family members. So it was a love, to me it's a love story about people caring about each other.
That's beautiful, because when and all the information that you share with our team is going to go in with the interview too, so people can know that information that you shared with us. Just for the fun of it, before today, I kind of looked at the something my students do, and I tell them never do this. I looked at the wiki page for Thomas Garrett, at the Wikipedia.
Oh yeah,
and, I was kind of looking through it, and I thought this is kind of interesting, because when they talk about the why, they say, well, he was a Quaker, and he was a Quaker, so he did this. I'm thinking, most Quakers were not,
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because you're Quaker doesn't mean you're involved with the Underground Railroad and break the law. There's different ways to get involved, and you can give money. You can boycott goods made in the South. You can write in newspapers. You can verbally say, "Oh, I'm against it," but not do anything. Thomas Garrett and a lot of people besides Thomas, the network to freedom, broke the law. They knew they break the law of the land, but not God's law. It should touch people's heart, but some people are so calloused because they're me people. They're not we people, and I think the society is getting that way where they just care about themselves. You should care about your neighborhood. You should care about your state. You should care about your country. And these people did. In fact, Thomas Garrett went to meet with President Lincoln with a group from Longwood. There were 6 individuals, 3 men and 3 women. Why 3 men and 3 women? Equality. So they went down to meet with President Lincoln June of 1862 to talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. I have the documentation. Within a month, in July, President Lincoln starts drafting the Emancipation Proclamation. So do I think they played a big influence on the drafting of the Emancipation Proclamation? The group from Longwood did, I believe. So there's different ways to attack slavery. And some of them put their lives on the line for freedom. Yeah. And some were convicted. Thomas Garrett was tried in 1848 for helping the Hawkins family. And the judge was Chief Justice Roger Broctani, who would later on to rule in the Dred Scott case. He fined Thomas $5,400. You think Thomas had a chance? I don't think so. Who were the jurors? All pro-slavery. Do I think he had a chance? Absolutely not.
But his family, you mentioned earlier before the interview started, and so much of this is about family. His wife.
Yeah.
Tell us about that part of the story.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of people don't know that.
So here, Thomas is fined $5,400, and his attorney was John Wales, who actually lived next to him. But he had a wonderful wife that I think I would be proud to be married to. And her name was Rachel Mendenhall. Now, this is Thomas Garrett's second wife. His first wife had passed away. And I said to my wife, if you're fined $5,400, which is probably equivalent to, let's say, $500,000. I'm not a mathematician, but it might be 400,000, 500. It's a lot of money. And I said to my wife, listen, if I was fined $5,000, if I was fined $500,000, would you stay with me like Rachel stayed with Thomas? And she says, absolutely not. So and then I said, and when people Run to Freedom came to Thomas and Rachel's house, Rachel would donate her clothes and the kids' clothes, and Thomas would. So Rachel was losing clothes. She was losing her food money. She almost lost her house, but she stayed with Thomas. And Rachel doesn't get a whole lot of credit when it comes to helping out on the Underground Railroad. And Rachel didn't say to Thomas, I want you to put an end to your anti-slavery society. Thomas, what are you doing? We're going to lose our house. We're losing a lot of money. People aren't talking to us anymore. Rachel didn't say that. She supported Thomas's activities. So give Rachel a lot of credit. You're reading the books about Thomas, but you don't read about Rachel.
Never.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm saying here today, in the future, let's give Rachel a lot of credit for sticking with Thomas. My wife wouldn't stick with me. Hopefully, in the future, my wife doesn't get this tape.
Right. Yeah. But this is exactly about why we're doing this oral history project. Is, again, the name of Thomas Garrett is rightfully known, but who are the people around him? Who is his family? Who are his descendants? Those are things we have absolutely, yeah.
Well, I'd already told you Rachel Mendenhall was the second wife. Next to him was John Wales, who represented Thomas at the trial in 1848. And back of him was Patrick Holland. Who's Patrick Holland? Nobody had?
No one knows.
He had carriages. He lived in the back of the house of Thomas. What was it? Seabird took a picture of the house, and he called it Thomas Garrett's house. He took a picture of John Wales's house. Oh. Next to him was actually Thomas's house, and in back of their houses was the stables where they can get the carriage, so they could walk out Thomas's back door into Patrick Holland's stables. John Wales, since he's an attorney, he could draw up papers, freedom papers, to give to people to run to freedom. If they're boarding the train, you have to show freedom papers. So who could draw them up? John did. John could draw them up for him. Then he had his business down the street. And his business was a hardware business. So he had to make some deliveries. He also had to make some pickups of his tools. But he also picked up other things other than tools. So he had the wagons going down there. He could go and deliver some stuff down in southern part of Delaware or into Maryland and pick up some supplies or some people on the way to freedom. Then he can deliver into Pennsylvania. So he had a nice business there. And he moved down there in 1822. Nice location, just close to the line of Pennsylvania. And they could go up Route 52 into Longwood. They can go up Route 13 through Chester, through Marcus Hook, through Chester into Philadelphia. We're talking by foot, by carriage, but also by train. You read a lot of stories about putting people on trains into Philadelphia, into William Still's location where he recorded the information, but also by boat. He mentions Captain Fountain and the Rocks. And I had the opportunity to go down with Debbie Martin and meet the Craig family and the other families involved with Captain Fountain at the Rocks, the story about the Rocks running to freedom. So there are many means of transportation, by foot, by carriage, by boat, by train. And there's another part that I want to mention is Thomas bought property in Maryland, and it was a furnace, and I think it was Pacopio or something like that, furnace, if I can get the name right. And he and a couple other abolitionists bought this property, and it was right by the train tracks running into Delaware. And I think there's a possibility they bought it, and I think it was the 1830s. I had to check my records. And he could put people on the train at that point and actually bring them into Wilmington, Delaware, or into Marcus Hook or into Philadelphia. So I had to do more research. I'm constantly researching, constantly.
So it sounds the story that you're telling us is this is a story about people helping people
At any cost.
at any cost, but they're doing it in a society which, even to this day, encourages you to look out for number one, me to look out for number one. But these are people going against the grain of that.
Yeah, and Thomas learned from a young age when an African American free servant working for the family was taken from Riverview into Philadelphia, and Thomas jumped on his horse and followed the tracks of the wagon. There was something about the wheel where he could follow the tracks on the wagon and brought her back to Riverview Farms. So he learned from a young age, and I think he had a vision from God like Paul had on the road to Damascus, that this was God's purpose in his life. And he was unwavering, no matter what got in his way. He lost 3 daughters. He was tried. He was threatened many times. But this was his purpose in life, and he didn't waver from that purpose, no matter what happened to him. Like at the trial, when he was fined in 1848, he considered it a victory because the newspapers covered it. More money came into the Abolitionist Society. And people that were enslaved knew about Thomas Garrett and where to run. So you can look at it from a positive or a negative. $5,000 is a lot of money. It wasn't fair for Thomas to be fined that much money, but Thomas looks at it and said he considered it a victory because now people knew about him. More people knew about him. People did know about him, but more people knew about him, and more money came in for the cause. So it changed a lot of people's minds when they heard Thomas was fined $5,400. By the way, we just discovered, we're researching all the time, and Robin Kravitz sent me an email. Thomas was also tried in 1843, and it was a state trial. The other was a federal trial. Roger Brooke Tyner was a federal trial. But it's a state trial, and he was acquitted. He was found not guilty, and the trial was 1848. So we're constantly researching, and Robin came across that and immediately shared it with me. It's about sharing all this information so we can educate people. And then I shared it with Debbie Martin in Wilmington, Delaware, who I worked with for years. In fact, she's the one who said, I just came out of the hospital, and she said, we're going to dedicate a statue of Harriet and Thomas embracing each other. It's going to be in Wilmington, near the train station at the park. Wow. What you talk? And I said, yeah, that sounds good. So I went down there in October and shared the story. But I forget what the purpose of it.
No, this is great. Well, no, this brings up my next thought, which was, I mean, I could tell as soon as I walked in this room that you're a great teacher. And what I wanted to ask you next, Bob, is as a teacher of this remarkable history, could you share with me some of the impacts that you've seen when you tell people these stories? You know, sometimes you teach and you feel like you're just talking to the wall, but other times you can see an impact, you can see some transformation. Can you talk about how these stories have helped transform people that you've witnessed?
People that I've talked to 20, 30 years ago when I started are still in contact with me. That's saying a lot. I have kids come into this room that we're being filmed with today that are homeschooled. And I've talked to them, and they're still in contact with me. I see people when we dedicated this property with the National Park Service, and Manoa School was here. And those kids I run in the street. Do you remember, Mr. Seeley, when we dedicated that? And I love the story, and I'm reading more about it.
Wow.
So now they're researching. Now they're educating other people. So when I started, 30 or someone years ago, and I planted seeds, and those seeds are growing, and more people are talking about it. So you think, oh, you're only talking to 10 people, 20 people. No, those people are now telling the stories that and then when I spoke at Delaware County Community College. I lectured on Thomas Garrett. I lectured on the Underground Railroad. And some of them were older. They're telling their grandchildren. They're telling their children. So it's spreading. The news is spreading, and it's getting into colleges. And one day, more colleges are covering it, and more private schools are covering it. It's the public schools that need to wake up and put this into our American history program. Oh, we don't have enough room. Well, take out something else. Let's get this in there, which is a very important part of our American history. So I planted the seeds and watered it a little bit, and those seeds are growing. I like to use that as an example because I was a horticulturalist.
Love it. Wonderful metaphor. One of the things, as you're telling me these stories, and I'm realizing, I teach African American history. We talk about the Underground Railroad as being like a key part of U.S. history, but I realize how much I don't know that you've educated me about the behind the scenes. What you are sharing with us are the family histories that just matter so much. Are there other aspects of family that to you are important in this story of the Underground Railroad? Like this kind of ruminate more about family. I mean, you've already shared so much, but I want to make sure we've gotten more of the family dimension.
Well, we're never finished, and we're constantly searching. And I want to share it with the family members. And Linda, who donated that hat, if I didn't need Linda, that hat might have been deteriorated and put in the trash and thrown away.
Tell me about the hat. You told me before we started, but tell if you don't mind. The hat.
Linda McDonald's sister. Linda comes from Dr. Henry Garrett's line, who married Canby, Kathleen or Catherine Canby. So she's from that line. And this hat was in New England states, and it was in a barn. It wasn't in an attic. A lot of stuff that we discovered are in an attic, but this one was in a barn. So the temperatures dropped even more. The hat box deteriorated, and the hat, you can see it's in good condition.
That's a hat that Thomas Garrett
owned one of those hats. The other was owned by either his son or grandson. And you can tell by the maker which one was Thomas's hat. So it was and I happened to connect through social media with a lot of the family members. I think it was either, maybe I ran into her at one of the events. But anyway, she said to me, I have Thomas's hat. Where can we, and I want to donate it. Where should we donate to? I said, it's either the museum in Wilmington, the courthouse where Thomas was tried, or here at Arlington. I wanted to hear at Arlington because I wanted to connect Wilmington with this area and bring people to this area with this hat. It's amazing that it survived. Yeah. Now, what else is then that she Linda's also, her and her brothers and sisters donated the silver tea set, which is down in Wilmington, Delaware. And it says something like, to Thomas Garrett, through evil report, good report, by faithful friend and wise counselor, generous benefactor of the wrong and oppressed. It was donated January of 1866 on the anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation and only days after the 13th Amendment. It was given to them by the African American churches. So they had this in their house in Staten Island in New York, and I have a picture of Tom Garrett with his mother, or it's actually stepmother. It doesn't matter. Standing next to that hat. So they donate that, and they donated the hat. And she says to me, I'm not sure what to do with John Wales's desk. What are you talking about, Linda? I have John Wales's desk. And John Wales is the attorney. And here, and the desk is at, and there's a letter, and the letter basically says, the will was, we're supposed to give the Garrett family John's desk, but we forgot, we still have it. And that's what the letter says. And so the Wales family gave it to the Garrett family. So Linda has a desk and says, what are we going to do? I said, well, we have to donate it. What good is it at your house? So I meet family members. And then there was another family member. Sally Hughes was a daguerreotyper, one of the first women daguerreotypers. And her last name is Hewes. And her family, I discovered living family members there, and they had a couple letters in their attic. And they copied them and gave me these letters, which I shared on social media, and I shared wherever I can. So there are a couple items still in the family that I like to see.
The letters were from, were...
Oh, the letters were from Thomas Garrett to the family about their mother. Sally died young age. She studied with Samuel Broadbent. She was a daguerreotyper, probably the first woman daguerreotyper. It's just like her brother Elwood was a daguerreotyper, and probably one of the first men that were daguerreotyper in the United States. So we must share what we have. Mm-hmm. No good in the attic.
No good in the attic, yeah. Bob, there's some questions here about what are important places related to your family's participation in the Underground Railroad story. You shared some of these, and Sherry, I don't know if we should go into that part or if this is already information that the Park Service may have because Bob's worked so close with you in the past, or these are just so when we get to, do you know specific places from your family history that should be listed in the Network to Freedom? Is that, okay.
So I wrote down, see if I can find it, some of the places, if I can find it.
And and as if we don't get everything today, we can continue to follow up with,
Well, one, National Park Service, Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program, there are places in this area that should apply.
Okay.
One is Samuel Rhodes' house. And Samuel Rhodes' house was, the property's still there, the house is gone. And that is Cobb's Creek Golf Course. His name was Samuel Rhodes. He's a cousin to Thomas Garrett. There's letters that I'm sending a person to, or people to Samuel Rhodes' house, and Thomas says in his letter, and one of my sons will be there when they arrive. So that's Cobb's Creek Golf Course. That should be part of it.
Okay.
Benjamin Price's house, or Philip Price's house in Westchester would be another one. Westtown School, we know that was a part of the Underground Railroad. Mm-hmm. Westtown School would be another one. In this particular area, Sellers Hall, we have documentation that Sellers Hall, it said as many as 30 people were harbored in, they didn't use the word harbor, in the barn. Mm-hmm. Samuel, and Sellers Hall was Abigail Sellers' parents' house, and Abigail Sellers married Edward Garrett. Abraham Pennock. Abraham Pennock owned Hoodland. And Hoodland, Abraham Pennock, we have documentation that he was involved on the Underground Railroad. He also wrote newspapers. He was friends with, I think, John Greenleaf Whittier, if I can recall. I have to look. And that would be in right here. And we formed this Black Lives Matter on Underground Railroad stops here in Upper Darby. And that's now it's Upper Darby Library. So that should be on there. And the burial grounds. There is a burial grounds in Upper Darby, which is Friends Southwest Burial Grounds. And that Friends, that has Edward Garrett's buried there, Isaac's buried there, Samuel Rhodes is buried there, Passmore Williamson is buried there. Passmore Williamson, the story of Passmore Williamson. So he's buried there. There are many people who put their lives on the line that are buried in this cemetery in Upper Darby. Eden Cemetery is already on. So, and that's where William Still's buried. Eden Cemetery is just over the hill from Darby Friends meeting where Thomas Garrett attended. Darby Friends meetings should be on the Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program. There are many abolitionists that dedicate their lives that worship there, that form their thoughts, that dedicated their lives at any cost. Some of these individuals in Upper Darby were down in Philadelphia when they burned Pennsylvania Hall to the ground. Some of the women of these women in Upper Darby, some of the Sellers women, some of the Garrett women were down there. And they walked out arm in arm out Pennsylvania Hall as they burned it down to the ground. And I was there about a week. And I have documentation of that. So you'll see some of these places. There's another place called the Howard House that's knocked down, but that's where a lot of the abolitionists met. Pika's Restaurant's there today. So we formed this for the mayor, Mayor Kiefer, or Kiefer. I pronounce it both ways. I don't know which is correct. These are the places that should be on it, on the Network to Freedom. Thornfield has a PHNC marker. But it's not on the Network to Freedom program. That was Thomas Garrett's half-brother, Samuel, and his house was used. And if you want references on that, look in Smedley's book. Okay. Smedley's book says, from Benjamin, Thomas sent it to Benjamin Price, who sent it to his cousin, Isaac Philip, who was living with Edward, and Samuel Garrett. Now, some people took that as the relatives out near Westchester in Goshen area, but that's not the case. It was Thomas Garrett's brothers here in Upper Darby. I saw some people saying it was, but that is not true. It's the ones here in Upper Darby. So it's Thornfield, Riverview, which turned into Cleveland Farms, and this is called Fernland Farms, where we're at now, and that was Isaac Price Garrett's house, who married Phoebe Rhodes, another Rhodes. So there are connections in the Garrett and the Sellers family for the cause of freedom. It strengthened the cause. So who can you trust? Most of this area were abolitionists or anti-slavery, because not everyone was harbored people in their houses.
Yeah.
Some gave to the cause, gave money, wrote newspapers, but there are others who broke the law.
Excuse my ignorance, Bob, but are people in this area, I mean, what you're describing to me this is incredible.
Yeah.
Are people in this area today, by and large, familiar with this history?
No. They weren't. They were just general, but not like this. And I said to Barbara and Kiefer, we should develop a map, a walking trail. Now, I wanted a riding trail because I can't walk that far. Right. And she wanted to walk it because she's younger. She can walk it. I can't walk it. I said, let's call it a riding trail. No, we're going to call it a walking trail. I said, well, you're the mayor. So we called it a walking trail. So I had all this text. I wrote this text, and then people, like Sherry did, correct my punctuation and change a couple words because they're the experts in English. I was not. I got a C in English.
All right, that's fine.
Well, yeah,
That's okay.
Mum is the word.
Right, we can edit that out.
So these are important stops. Then I had another brochure, and I have it.
But these are important stops, but they're
Yeah.
not currently on the Freedom Network.
That's correct.
Okay, I get
And
it.
that's because who's going to step up to the cause and put them on there? The problem we face today is who's going to take the time to fill out the application, to make sure all the T's are crossed and the punctuation, all that. I don't have the time. I don't have the time. And someone has to step up to the plate.
Yeah,
This is a very important part of our history.
exactly. You're right, it's very time consuming. In our county, in Alachua County, we're working with the Equal Justice Initiative to create markers, commemorating the victims of lynching. And that project has taken tons of time.
Oh, yeah.
You have to work together in a network. One individual just can't do it all.
And then I found over the years, there's competition between people. I know of an individual who's a professor, and he's very nice, and he does his work. And he was going to give a lecture, and he found out I was attending. And he says to me, Bob, I don't want you to say anything at the lecture. I don't want you to get this information out before I have a chance to lecture. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. If I ever did it in the past, I didn't mean to. I promise I won't say a word. I went to another, there was a bus tour, and the person who gave me the bus tour was out in Chester County. And I knew a lot of the stops, and I had the information. And she was training someone new on the bus. And she asked me to zip it, don't say a word, don't share your knowledge, because that person might not come back because she feels that she's not good enough to give the tour. I understand that. And I make mistakes. And I'm glad people bring it to my attention that And one thing I don't want to do is halt this. I want people to share the information. And if I get in the way, let me know. So I do run into some things like that. I really don't mean to do it. And people get competition or jealous about other people. Then people tell me. I'm glad they tell me, but that never my intent. I get enthusiastic about what I do, it's sad that that happens, but it does. I guess it in any field.
It does. I have the same challenges in Florida. Well, Bob, I feel like we have monopolized a lot of your time, and I'm just so grateful, and I've learned so much. And I just want to assure you that so many people are going to learn so much from your life story, the stories about the Underground Railroad, taking us behind the scenes, as it were, that we're going to work very hard to make sure this information gets out into public schools, you mentioned. It's critical.
I think it's so important to move forward, and the public schools, a good place, but start when they're in kindergarten.
Start young.
Yeah,
Very
don't
young.
wait till they get in high school. A lot of their thoughts are already formed.
Right.
Let's form the thoughts when they're very young. So we can get into the kindergarten classes. That would be wonderful. I was fortunate enough to grow up with a grandmother, and It didn't matter what color skin you were. It didn't matter what religion you were. You gave to others. She set the example. She didn't. It wasn't just talk. She slept on the sofa. Gave his kids a bedroom. Gave her mother a bedroom who deserted her. She took her in. So that's what we do. And when my father died, I buried him. I met him 3 times or 4 times, whatever it was. But that's the thing to do, is take care of other people.
Yeah.
That's love. That's the way we're doing. That's what the Bible teaches us too. So anyway,
Exactly.
I get. It's hard for me to understand that so many people are just self-centered. It's all about me, 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 me. Back then, these people set the example that we should follow, and we're not. So anyway.
Well, this is incredible. Bob, are there any other thoughts you want to share as we wrap up? And because I could do this all day now, but I think we at a certain point but anything else that you wanted to share that?
These documents up here. There's a picture of William Still up here on the
Right.
Vigilance Committee, and that's his accounting book. And in that particular account, he's paying Thomas Garrett, I think, $2 for the shoes of Harriet. It was $2 or $4, but it was. This is. Oh, I should get my glasses. This is the Pennsylvania Abolitionist Society Vigilance Committee in 1854. And you'll see McKim up there. You'll see Thomas Garrett. This is Thomas Garrett. That's Purvis. This is William Still. There's Passmore Williamson in here. So not only did he help people to freedom, but he got involved with the committees.
Yeah.
He also got involved with housing and education. It didn't stop with coming over the line to freedom. He continued it by supporting equal rights for education and housing. But he was involved with the Abolitionist Society, anti-slave societies. There's a picture of Harriet. And this is the fine when she, in 1840, I think it was 1849, when she's running, how much she's worth. The more you're worth, the more status you had. A young woman who could bear children, and if she ran, that's a lot of money. The reward would be higher. An old person like myself running the freedom, I can't run anymore, but I'm not worth a whole lot of money. They don't need me anymore. So I'm not worth a whole lot. She's worth a whole lot of money. And then people run the freedom. She goes back time and time again to help other people. So a lot of people run the freedom stayed north. They didn't go back again. Harry goes back and time again to help other people, family and friends to freedom, including her parents who stopped at Thomas's house. Not only she was involved with the abolitionist movement and helping many people to freedom, but she's involved in the Civil War too. She was a cook, she was a spy, and she was cook, spy, and nurse. She had 3 jobs. Most people could only handle 1. She handled 3. And then she went behind enemy lines and brought many people to the boats, and they shipped them north to freedom. They say she only helped 300 or whatever. They don't take into consideration the Civil War. Thousands of people she helped. And she could have stayed north. She didn't have to go back down again, but she cared about other people. And that's what we're supposed to do. A hero. A hero. There's a map here, and you can see the properties. I think there's an 1848 map. That's 1871. But you can see the properties. Here's Fairland Farms, which is now Arlington Cemetery, Isaac's house, and this would be Cleveland Farms. That was Edward's house. Nathan, Thomas Garrett's father's brother, owned property over here, and it's called Bloomfield. hey, this comes in handy. I don't need a pointer. At Bloomfield, and
Right.
when Thomas Garrett's father, the land was split in two. And half went to Thomas Garrett's father. The other half went to Nathan, and that's the line that Samuel Rhodes came from. So we owned a lot of Drexel Hill area, and Cleveland Farms sits right here. That was Samuel Garrett's house, whose son William Garrett married a Sellers. Geez, I'm having a senior moment. Here we go again. These senior moments. I could rattle off when I was younger, but I'm getting old, so I forget. So all this land here, and then here is a lot of the Sellers family. There's right here is John Sellers, who owned a mill. Another place where you had a lot of deliveries and you could do a lot of transportation of people.
Okay.
And John's wife was Elizabeth Poole, and she came from Wilmington, Delaware. And their daughter married Eli Garrett. So there's a connection there. Eli marries their daughter. John sells Elizabeth Poole's daughter, and her name is Frances Sellers.
Okay.
So, and they would move down to Wilmington, Delaware. So a lot of connections in this area to Thomas, between the Poole family, the Garrett family, the Sellers family, in Wilmington, Delaware. Who could you trust? He knew he could trust family, and he knew he could trust the friends here in Darby area. He knew he could trust his mother, who was a Price, brother who lived in Westchester. He knew he could trust the people on Longwood, all the people that are involved with Longwood. So, there's letters here. That's an aerial view of Arlington Cemetery. The land was split in two. Originally it was 284 acres. It was split in two between Edward Garrett and Edward's. Where is Edward? Edward was here somewhere. Someone took Edward away. That's Henry, Thomas's son, with Catherine Canby. This is Elwood Garrett, who's the daguerreotyper. And I think he was in 90s when he passed away. Wilmington Brandywine Cemetery. In fact, they were board members. Isaac, who lived here. There's Thomas in the back. This is Rachel when she gets older. I have a picture of Rachel when she's younger. There's books here. Harriet Beecher Stowe. Thomas Garrett was portrayed as Simeon.
Halliday, yeah. Simeon
Yeah.
Halliday,
You can read that in the key to Harriet Beecher Stowe. And there's shackles here. The Bible. Oh, it's the Bible of the Underground Railroad. William Still. And if you want to know about the Underground Railroad, he recorded the information and he put families back together. He was a hero. And he's buried here in Delaware County. He's buried at Eden Cemetery. And where did I get a lot of this information? From William Still. Before people knew where William Still was buried, I knew. And I put a wreath on his grave up to I had the heart attack. And I don't go down. I spoke at, that's one of the places I spoke. When did I spoke? To honor our ancestors. There are many heroes buried at Eden Cemetery. This is where we learn. Dear friend, Judith Bentley, Jim McGowan, station master in the Underground Railroad, and there's a movie. It's called Whispers of Angels, starring Ed Asner as Thomas Garrett, and help me Sherry, Blair Underwood as William Still. And it was filmed in Wilmington, Delaware, PBS, a wonderful movie. So I wanted to mention that too. Did I miss anything, Sherry? So this is, but Start them young. These are books for younger people. And we need to get these books out. Chick-fil-A, Harriet Tubman, Values of Helping. Teach them young.
Yeah.
And there's another book here. This is Scholastic. A good way to write is write to Scholastic.
Exactly.
There's another book that's going to come out. Someone's asking me to edit. I told her I wasn't an English major. I'm not real good at it, but I'll do my best. And she sent me the copy, and she wanted me to read it, so I read it and offer my advice. And even though I offer my advice, she's going to print it as is anyway.
Nice.
But that's but I got to know her, and it looks like it's going to be for elementary school kids. It's about 70-some pages, but the language is as such. But what I disagreed with is the woman that was at Thomas Garrett's house, and she was working for the family, was captured, taken to Philadelphia. She had her married before, and her husband was killed. And the Garrett family took her in, and she had 2 children. I said, where'd you get that information? I'd never heard it before. So I said, tell me your source. I'd like to know. And she doesn't remember where she got the source from. So now I'm so curious. I want to find out where. So I'll spend hours trying to figure out if that's a true story or if that's fiction. Mm-hmm. So anyway, there's letters that I share, and the letters are over there. And the hats here. Oh. This is National Park Service Network, the Freedom symbol, which is here and up at the house. Can you take it past the house and show them the when we dedicate it? Did you want me to take you to some of these places, or you don't have time? It's not necessary. Okay. This is Thomas Garrett Sr. and Sarah Price, and this is Riverview. Thomas Garrett donated, and I sent it to you. Dr. Richard Allen, mm-hmm. And the church is still there. The Bible's still there. It's in a case. And it was donated not by Thomas Garrett. It was 1802. He would have been, 11, 13 years old.
Yeah.
It was his father.
Wow.
His father donated the Bible. We're friends with the Allen family, too. And this is Thomas Garrett and Rachel when she's younger. That's Rachel when she's older. And the reason she aged that much is because dealing with Thomas all those years. She's actually only 30 years old in that picture. No, that's not true. This is oil painting done by Bass Otis. I think it was 1839, might be 1838, and that was done by Bass Otis. So we wanted as much information here as possible to attract people. How many people have seen this museum? Thousands of people. Why?
That is so cool.
Because this is Arlington Cemetery, Topper Funeral Home. And there's funerals that come in that chapel.
For the record, what is the name of the museum?
It's called the Arlington Museum with the Garrett Collection. Because this property was sold to Arlington Cemetery in 1895. It was owned by the family until then. The last owner, I think, was Emlyn. You'll find Emlyn family out at Willistown. You'll see the article. I don't know if I sent it to you or not. Debbie Martin has it. Talk about research. Debbie Martin is fabulous. Cassandra Marshall is fabulous. Those people in the Newcastle Courthouse are excellent. And then Robin, I've known Robin for a long time. Mm-hmm. She was a professor at Delaware State. She worked for the state. She worked up in Cooperstown. She keeps on traveling. I said, I can't keep track of you. But I'm happy that you're doing this.
Well, we're happy that we had the chance to meet you and form a friendship and just learn so much.